It was a dark and stormy night in the suburbs of Palo Alto, which, for Palo Alto, is a mild 68 degrees Fahrenheit with some light cloud coverage.
It was 1971, and Palo Alto police officers rolled up in front of an unsuspecting college student's house. Little did Stephen and Mark know that the 2-week experiment they had signed up for was just the beginning, and it was an experience they would never forget.
Many students had signed up for this study, created by Stanford professor Philip Zimbardo, but only those chosen to be prisoners were picked up by the police. By the luck of a draw, or a coin toss, the remaining volunteers were to act as guards.
They arrived at the esteemed Stanford University and were taken into the basement of the psychology building, which had been transformed into a makeshift jail. There, the prisoners were promptly stripped and searched, deloused, and then given a uniform, a numbered gown, which Zimbardo called a dress, with a heavy bolted chain near the ankle, loose-fitting rubber sandals, and a cap made from a woman's nylon stocking.
Meanwhile, the guards got sticks and sunglasses and were given a few very basic ground rules but no specific instructions. It was suggested that they create their own systems to maintain order and garner the respect of the prisoners.
Unsurprisingly, things went horribly awry. When prisoners talked back to the guards would promptly use violence to subdue them, violating an explicit injunction against physical force that both prisoners and guards had read prior to enrolling in the study. This continued because Zimbardo, who was the superintendent, and other officials did not give any negative feedback, which was taken as approval.
After nearly a week at the Stanford County Jail, Zimbardo had a visit from Christina Maslach, a graduate student at Stanford. She evaluated the disastrous study and promptly concluded that things had gone too far and the experiment must be shut down. Zimbardo was captivated by the monstrosities of human nature his experiment revealed, but agreed that it needed to end. The Zimbardo prison study, originally planned for 2 weeks, was shut down after 6 days.
While the Stanford prison experiment is often presented as the key into the psyche of every human being, often cited to support the belief that given the opportunity, anyone will turn violent, it is actually not that simple.
From the very beginning, Zimbardo created the experiment expecting that the guards would establish their own tyrannies, including violence if need be. The experiment was unethical the moment the guards left the room in which they were briefed.
Zimbardo even told his guards, "You can create in the prisoners feelings of boredom, a sense of fear to some degree. You can create a notion of arbitrariness in their life that is totally controlled by us, by the system. You, me, they can do nothing, say nothing that we don't permit."
For one thing, the way the results are presented is usually heavily manipulated. Zimbardo himself said that about a third of the guards became tyrannical in their arbitrary use of power, which makes for a total of 4 people. In spite of this fact, it is often said that the entire group of guards became violent.
Furthermore, a huge part of the reason the Stanford prison experiment is often used as a blanket under which all of humanity falls is because the people Zimbardo selected to be in the experiment were considered normal. Obviously, the definition of normal is not as clear-cut as Zimbardo seems to believe.
And all the subjects were white, male college students, which hardly represents the entire population.
Taken with a grain of salt, the Stanford prison experiment does seem to suggest that adding a layer of anonymity to situations of power difference does have an effect.
Both the prisoners and the guards were anonymous. Both wore uniforms. The guards were also given sunglasses which obscured their eyes, and the prisoners were given numbers which they were instructed to use in lieu of names.
It seems that treating the prisoners as numbers and the guards' feeling of being unknown encouraged abuse.
Clearly, anonymity can only go so far in determining how people interact with one another. Their perception of power and authority was also a crucial element in how the Stanford prison experiment resulted.
The guards knew that they had power over the prisoners, which was only exacerbated by the fact that Zimbardo and the other researchers never commented on their behavior, which was taken as approval.
The Stanford prison experiment was recreated in December 2001 by psychologists Stephen Riker and Alexander Haslam in the United Kingdom. Because they worked with the documentaries unit of the BBC, it became known as the BBC Prison Study.
The BBC prison study was a partial recreation of the Stanford prison experiment done over 8 days. Their guards were also given uniforms and the power to punish and reward their prisoners. The layout of the prison also matched Zimbardo's exactly.
The prisoners were also told that, if they behaved well, they could become guards. This offer was then rescinded on the third day. The researchers also had the subjects fill out surveys each day asking them to record how much solidarity they felt with their group. The prisoners were also told that, if they behaved well, they could become guards. This offer was then rescinded on the third day. The researchers also had the subjects fill out surveys each day asking them to record how much solidarity they felt with their group.
They found that the guards didn't begin to act like a cohesive group. Some were quite concerned about overextending their authority. The prisoners, on the other hand, joined forces quickly, and as the guards grew further apart, the prisoners became closer.
Just like Zimbardo's study, the BBC prisoners acted out. One prisoner tossed his plate on the floor and ordered better food, another asked for a cigarette, and one more sought medical attention for a foot blister.
The lax reactions led to even more challenges on the part of the prisoners. They would misbehave during roll call, grumble about the food, and even talk back. By the 6th day, 3 prisoners even worked together to occupy the guards' quarters.
Instead of cracking down harder in response to these outcries, the guards became even more disorganized, and one even gave the prisoner who asked for one a cigarette.
Because the BBC guards were given absolutely no instructions on how to make the prison work, they struggled, and the outcome was very different than the Stanford prison experiment, which had explicit instructions for the guards.
These 2 experiments together actually tell us nothing about human behavior other than that people will meet the expectations provided to them. Because Zimbardo expected his guards to abuse their power, they did.
With that in mind, it makes perfect sense that the real prison guards also exhibit these tendencies because they're working in heavily manipulated environments. Guards apply for those jobs just like Zimbardo's subjects were self-selected, and they also follow the norms and behaviors of their predecessors. With that in mind, it makes perfect sense that the real prison guards also exhibit these tendencies because they're working in heavily manipulated environments. Guards apply for those jobs just like Zimbardo's subjects were self-selected, and they also follow the norms and behaviors of their predecessors.
Ergo, what we take from the Stanford prison experiment shouldn't be that any normal person can do horrible things. It's that situations that demand awful behavior will get it, so we should change those environments.